What if this video didn't just show up in your feed, but was divinely placed? What if heaven handpicked this moment, right here, right now, because you're finally ready to hear what you once weren't strong enough to carry? There are millions of videos, billions of distractions, but somehow your spirit paused on this one. That's not an algorithm, that's alignment. That's God whispering, stop, watch, listen. And if your heart's been stirring lately, if you felt like something is shifting inside but you couldn't put words to it, if the world around you has felt louder but your soul quieter, that's because you're on the edge of something sacred, and this isn't the kind of message you can scroll past. Before we go further, pause with me. If anything already resonates in your spirit, type 777 in the comments right now to mark this moment as the beginning of your next chapter. And to those of you who've supported this space through super thanks, I see you. I bless you. Your generosity is not forgotten. It's felt deeply. Now, lean in for a second. Have you ever wondered why life had to be so heavy for you? Why your joy had to come with so much warfare? Why you always felt like an outsider, even in rooms where you were the most gifted one? That's not delusion, that's design. You were built different because your calling is different. And here's the thing. This video didn't just find you because you needed encouragement. It found you because you needed confirmation. Proof that you're not crazy. Proof that your path isn't random. Proof that all this pain has been preparing you for something weighty, something holy. So don't skip this. Don't click away. Because what you're about to hear next might just be the moment your entire life pivots. God's chosen ones, you were meant to watch this immediately. Don't skip. You might not know this yet, chosen one, but the very fact that you're still here, still seeking, still watching this message, means you've already stepped into a rare kind of awakening. See, power is not in having potential, it's in remembering how to wield it. And many never do. Most people live like sleepwalkers. They respond to life rather than create it. They chase signs instead of becoming one. They wait for the universe to speak, not realizing it's been waiting on them to move. What if the moment you stopped waiting for everything to align was the moment everything began aligning? That's the divine inversion most people miss. You weren't called to wait for evidence before acting. You were called to act with faith that produces evidence. Just like Peter stepping out of the boat, he didn't walk on water because it looked safe. He walked because Jesus said, "Come," Matthew 14:29. And maybe, like Peter, you've had moments where you doubted mid-step. Moments where you started strong and then sank. But here's the miracle. Every time you rose again, your faith got sharper, your power more precise. Think about this. Why do some people walk into rooms and everything shifts, even when they say nothing? It's not charisma, it's alignment. They've trained their inner world to echo the frequency of abundance, not fear. They've chosen gratitude before seeing results, clarity before confirmation. And because of that, they draw in the very reality they once prayed for. Not through luck, through inner calibration. Albert Einstein once said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world." He wasn't just talking about intellect, he was talking about spiritual capacity. What you visualize from within shapes what you experience without. But for every Einstein, there's a Thomas Migley Jr., a brilliant inventor whose creations, like leaded gasoline and CFCs, unintentionally caused mass harm. He followed knowledge without soul, invention without wisdom, and the world bore the consequence. That's what happens when power is applied without spiritual alignment. And now, let me introduce you to someone who lived this message quietly. Camila Truss, a nurse from rural Argentina. For years, she worked night shifts, prayed silently, and wrote visions of a better life in her journals. She had no followers, no stage, but she had belief. When her hospital was understaffed during a crisis, she stepped in, organized volunteers, and restored order where chaos reigned. Today, she runs a foundation for trauma care in underserved areas. How? Not by chasing recognition, but by choosing alignment. She acted when nothing looked ready, and now everything responds to her inner readiness. But not everyone responds that way. Ronan Sutherland, a self-made entrepreneur, once led a fast-growing tech startup. He had all the numbers, the accolades, but lacked alignment. Obsessed with control and public image, he ignored internal burnout, silenced his team's wisdom, and gambled millions to expand too fast. The company imploded. Lawsuits followed. He lost not just money, but credibility. Why? Because ambition without awareness is a ticking time bomb. What about you? What if the tug in your chest right now, the one that brought you to this very message, isn't random at all? What if it's God whispering, "You're closer than you think"? Nature knows this principle. The Arctic fox, for instance, turns white in winter, not because it chooses to, but because its body responds to the unseen signal of shortening daylight. It doesn't wait for the snow to fall before it changes. It transforms in anticipation of what's coming. That's what spiritual alignment looks like. You shift internally before the external confirms it. And just like a volcano builds pressure deep underground before it ever erupts, your inner growth, your stillness, your questions, your awareness is preparing a breakthrough no one else can measure yet, not even you. But heaven knows. Victor Hammond, a man whose entire life changed after his third attempt at starting over. He'd lost his job, faced a bitter divorce, and moved into his cousin's garage, but he didn't numb the pain. He leaned into it. He started meditating each morning, fasting every Friday, and reading one psalm a day. 6 months later, a stranger in a prayer group offered him a job, managing a retreat center in the mountains. He cried the first night he slept there, not because of the money, but because he'd finally felt peace. It was like the ground stopped shaking, he said. Inner work built an outer reality. The world won't applaud you for doing this kind of work. There's no crowd cheering when you choose restraint over reaction, when you fast instead of feast, when you notice a toxic pattern and refuse to repeat it. But heaven notices, and that's what counts. Romans 12:2 reminds you, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." This isn't just mindset work, it's soul work. Think of it like architecture. If your life is a cathedral, then your thoughts are the blueprints, your emotions are the mortar, your choices are the chisels, and your awareness? That's the divine architect's eye. Without it, you're building blind. Right now, you're waking up to that awareness. You're no longer living reactively. You're choosing what to believe, what to absorb, what to amplify. And that choice, that quiet, powerful decision, is shifting your entire atmosphere, even if no one claps, even if no one notices, even if your name isn't trending, because what you're building is eternal, not trendy. Foundation, not facade. So don't shrink, don't wait, don't second-guess the surge inside you. You were meant to watch this, not later, not someday, but now. And heaven is already responding. It's strange, isn't it, chosen one? How this world trains you to wait for permission to celebrate yourself. From childhood, you're conditioned to look outward, for the gold star, for the applause, for someone else to say, "Now you're worthy." But what if that permission slip you've been waiting on was never needed to begin with? What if your worth didn't begin when they noticed, but when you began? What if your becoming was valid, even in silence? God never needed external confirmation to declare something good. Genesis 1:31 says, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. No crowd, no camera, just divine presence, divine design, and divine satisfaction. And you, beloved, are made in that same image. Think about it. When a seed breaks open beneath the earth, does it wait for anyone to cheer before it pushes toward light? Number. It grows because it was encoded to rise. So are you. You've been taught that growth must be loud, celebrated, shared, but some of your greatest leaps have happened in private, in tears, in stillness, in moments no one witnessed except heaven. Does that make them less holy? Or does it make them more sacred? You are already enough, not because you've completed every goal, but because you kept going through what tried to stop you, because you stayed soft even after betrayal, because something inside you kept whispering, "This isn't the end of my story." That's not fantasy, that's divine memory. That's your soul remembering its assignment. Before you were formed in the womb, God said in Jeremiah 1:5, "I knew you, I set you apart." So why do you still wait for validation from people who don't even know your spiritual blueprint? Let's talk science for a moment. In the field of neuroscience, researchers have discovered something called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on what it repeatedly focuses on. What does that mean for you? It means your brain literally changes when you choose faith over fear. When you stop replaying past shame and start envisioning divine purpose, new pathways begin to form. Your healing isn't imaginary, it's neurological. Now let me show you this in motion. Inés Laredo, a speech therapist from Seville, Spain, spent 15 years working with children who had no voice. But outside the clinic, she whispered lies to herself. "You're too plain, too late, too soft-spoken." Then one day, a child who had never spoken before said her name, Inés. That moment shattered her self-doubt. She realized she had been teaching others to speak while silencing herself. So she enrolled in theology school at age 52. Today, she travels and teaches about spiritual awakening through language, and she'll tell you, healing begins the moment your soul hears its own name. Contrast that with Gareth Monroe, a popular self-help influencer in Los Angeles. For years, he sold courses on confidence while privately battling addiction and manipulating client testimonies. He never did the inner work, just curated the appearance of wholeness. Last year, he was exposed for fraud. Clients left, sponsors vanished. He collapsed under the weight of a persona he never truly lived. That's the danger of building image without integrity. When transformation is faked, it eventually folds. But you're not faking it. Even if your voice trembles, even if you're unsure, even if you've started and stopped 100 times, you're still here. You're still listening. That matters. I once knew a man named Elias Minter who worked as a parking attendant in Chicago. For 20 years, he read scriptures in his booth between cars. No one knew he was journaling prayers for each driver. One rainy night, a teenager approached him crying. Elias handed him a folded page from Psalm 91. The boy said later that was the night he decided not to end his life. Years later, Elias passed away quietly. But at his funeral, dozens came forward. People he'd prayed for anonymously. They called him a guardian in plain clothes. You don't need a platform to be powerful, just presence. And if you feel discomfort right now, don't run. That's not failure, that's the furnace. Just like a butterfly doesn't fly until its wings have dried in pain, your strength is being sealed in discomfort. Romans 5:3-4 says, "Suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope." But the mind resists this. The old programming, the one that says, stay small, stay quiet, stay safe, is just your nervous system replaying outdated data. But safe doesn't equal satisfied. And comfort? It rarely leads to calling. At some point, you must choose to exit the narrative of delay, that tired script that says you're not ready yet. not bold enough, not clean enough. That story has expired. It's time for a new one, a story where you stop being haunted by what hurt you and start being healed by what holds you now. A story where you stop begging for miracles and finally see you already are one. And if you're still unsure, take this as confirmation. Your very presence here, listening to these words, is no accident. This is divine timing. Heaven has orchestrated this moment to remind you you're waking up. The old version of you was built for survival, but this version, this one, is built for destiny. And chosen one, when you finally say yes to that inner stirring, when you dare to open your soul to receive without demand, the universe doesn't hesitate. It responds in patterns that defy logic and timing. But don't be startled if after this moment, things begin to move. Doors creak open that once felt permanently sealed. Strangers speak words you needed. Dreams return not as fantasy, but as instruction. Could it be that what you once called coincidence was actually divine coordination waiting for your awareness? These weren't coincidences, they were coordinates. They've always been there, but now you've tuned in. Now you're not just hearing, you're receiving. This is what Paul described in 2 Corinthians 4:18. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. You're no longer drifting through life as a passive participant. Now you're becoming a vessel. Life is no longer happening to you, it's moving through you. And from this sacred position, you don't just hope for a miracle. You carry the frequency of one. You're not merely a dreamer anymore. You are a builder of reality. And that's where your true power lives. Not in your ability to predict outcomes, but in your ability to direct focus. Because where your attention goes, your energy flows. That's not some soft-spoken philosophy, it's a spiritual law. It's the law Jesus lived by when he said in Mark 11:24, "Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." Let's bring this to the stars for a moment. In astrophysics, there's a principle called gravitational lensing. It means that massive celestial objects, like stars or black holes, can bend light, warp time, and even reveal things previously unseen, just by the sheer force of their presence. When you focus your energy, your spiritual gravity, on gratitude, on peace, on purpose, you start pulling into view things that were always around you, but distorted by fear. That's alignment. That's divine optics. And yes, if you keep focusing on what's missing, you will multiply lack. But if you anchor yourself in expectancy, in divine possibility, even the atmosphere around you will shift. People will feel it. They may not understand it, but they'll sense it. Your energy starts to hum at a new frequency. Doors open, not always all at once, but always with purpose. The journey of Zariah Ahmadi, a refugee turned entrepreneur from Lagos. She once lived in a tent with her younger brother, scraping by and translating legal documents at night to survive. But each morning she journaled 5 things she was grateful for. One of those days, a translator cancelled at a diplomatic summit and Zariah was asked to step in. Her calm, focused presence impressed a UN ambassador. Today, she leads a global non-profit for displaced youth. She never chased a stage. She radiated such focus and faith that doors bent toward her. Now contrast her with Ellison Dremont, a hedge fund manager obsessed with controlling every variable. He monitored numbers, manipulated markets, and demanded perfection. But when 2020 struck, his foundation, built on fear and false control, crumbled. He lost billions. His health deteriorated, and his silence afterwards spoke volumes. When your entire identity is control, the collapse feels like death. Are you still trying to control what you were meant to surrender to divine timing? That's not your path. You've been learning a different way. one of trust, one of quiet power. I knew someone once. Her name was Clara Vienne, a high school janitor who memorized quotes from books she'd overhear students reading. She kept a notebook of dreams, not for herself, but for others. Every student who stayed late found encouragement scribbled anonymously on their locker. Years later, when one of those students became a journalist, she tracked Clara down and published her story. It went viral. A book deal followed. Clara's quiet legacy of attention and encouragement changed lives, not through fame, but frequency. This is what you're stepping into now, not reaction, but creation, not panic, but presence. And yet, some days you may feel like you've wasted too much time. Maybe you replay the mistakes, the missed chances, the detours that felt like dead ends. But hear this with your spirit: nothing was wasted. Romans 8:28 declares, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." That includes your setbacks, your heartbreaks, your detours. The cosmos does not shame the star for burning out. It recycles it. It reforms it into a nebula, a supernova, a new beginning. Your delays weren't punishments. They were recalibrations. Every no was a redirection. Every closed door was divine rerouting. So the real question becomes, will you honor the delay as sacred preparation or curse it as wasted time? And now, chosen one, you're not being called to survive anymore. You're being summoned to rise. You're not walking blindly. You're moving with cosmic intention. There are no accidents in the realm of divine timing, chosen one. You didn't stumble upon this message by coincidence. You were meant to see this right now. Maybe you've been feeling like you're behind, like you've missed your chance, or fallen too far behind the pace of your peers. But what if the delay wasn't denial? It was divine design. What if the late bloom was actually a strategic placement, a divine delay meant to prepare you, not punish you? In the book of Ecclesiastes it says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." Ecclesiastes 3:11. Not in your time, not when the world claps for you, but his time. What if this is that time? What if everything you thought you were too late for is still available, because it was never about the clock but the calling? Have you noticed how the giant sequoia tree grows for years underground before it even dares to break the surface? It doesn't rush to bloom just because the world demands it. It trusts the unseen process. And you, chosen one, have been doing the same. What if the very chapter you thought was over is only now beginning to turn its page? Ava, a 43-year-old single mother who worked night shifts as a janitor. For years she told herself she had missed her chance. Too old, too tired, too forgotten. But one day, something shifted. She found an old vision board she had made a decade ago and decided quietly to believe again. Within 8 months, she opened a home baking business from her garage. By the end of the year, she was supplying 2 local cafes and mentoring teen girls in her neighborhood. That spark, it didn't come from luck. It came from her decision to move as if it was still possible. Why do so many people stay stuck? Is it fear of failure, or fear of becoming who they were always meant to be? When David stood before Goliath, he wasn't the strongest, tallest, or most trained, but he had something the others didn't: divine alignment. And when you are aligned, size and stature stop mattering. One sling, one stone, one belief in the unseen. That's all it takes to collapse the illusion of delay. What if Goliath in your life isn't an obstacle, but a marker that you're right where the breakthrough begins? Even Pope Francis, a man revered worldwide for his humility and compassion, didn't become Pope until the age of 76. For decades he served quietly, away from global recognition. And yet when the moment came, the world looked to him. Not because he chased power, but because he was ready for it. Now contrast that with someone like Adam Newman, the charismatic co-founder of WeWork. He raced toward glory, expansion, and validation, but without alignment. The fall was inevitable. because what is built on ego cannot stand where eternity intends to dwell. Have you ever wondered why wild horses run freely across open plains, yet remain untamed even in the presence of man? It's not because they're wild, it's because their spirit refuses to be boxed in. Your spirit, chosen one, is much the same. You were not made for cages, deadlines, or predictable timelines. You were made for flow, for wind in your hair kind of freedom, for divine explosions of destiny that make no sense until they do. And then there's Elijah Grant, a 29-year-old former Marine who spent 3 years battling PTSD and joblessness. One night, after nearly giving up, he sat on his porch staring at the stars. "God," he whispered, "if you still have a purpose for me, I'm ready." That very week, a friend invited him to volunteer at a community center. 2 years later, he leads a trauma recovery program for veterans. The breakthrough didn't arrive like a spotlight. It entered as a whisper. Just like this moment may be for you. Could it be that you're already standing in the beginning of your breakthrough, and the only thing left to do is recognize it? In neuroscience, there's a phenomenon called neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to rewire itself based on belief and behavior. Meaning this: when you act as if the change has already begun, your brain starts building that reality even before the evidence appears. It's not pretending, it's programming, and heaven already coded you for expansion. What if the software was just waiting for your belief to activate the system? Neuroscience calls it the Hebbian principle. Neurons that fire together, wire together. The more you think it, the more you become it. Every time you speak hope, imagine breakthrough, or act like the promise is real, your brain starts welding that reality into your structure. That's not motivation, that's divine rewiring. Not when it feels comfortable, but when it feels like a stretch, because growth never lives in the comfort zone. The eagle doesn't wait for the storm to pass. It rides the winds into higher altitudes. You, too, were meant to ascend, not after the chaos, but through it. The version of you who already walks in boldness, in peace, in purpose. That version is not far away. It's on the other side of a choice. A choice to trust, to move, to rise. If something stirred within you while reading these words, don't silence it. That stir is sacred. It's your soul's signal that you're waking up. And if your mind tries to doubt it again, return here. Let this message anchor you. Let it carry you. Because, chosen one, you are not behind. You are not broken. You are not forgotten. You are timed by heaven. And heaven is never late. They told you that you missed it, that the door closed, that the season passed. But what if they were wrong? What if the delay you've been feeling wasn't denial? It was divine recalibration. You're not behind, chosen one. You're being tuned, adjusted, quietly positioned by the hand of heaven for something your timing couldn't carry, but your alignment will. You've seen this in nature. When a flock of migrating geese loses its formation due to a storm, they don't abandon the journey. They realign mid-flight. Each bird listens to wind, adjusts to turbulence, and returns to formation. Could your delays be God's way of bringing you back into His perfect formation? One that won't just take you forward, but take you further than speed alone ever could. There's a moment in the life of Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, where everything looked like delay. But it wasn't punishment, it was positioning. Years later, he stood second in command over all of Egypt. What if that pit you were thrown into wasn't an end, but a calibration for a throne? Pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered why your spirit didn't fully resonate with the opportunities others chased? Why you felt disconnected from timelines everyone else seemed to worship? What if your spirit wasn't malfunctioning? What if it was resisting synchronization with systems not built for you? Take the story of Malcolm Reyes, a 39-year-old violinist who had once played with the State Symphony but found himself doing delivery work after being laid off. Friends told him to move on, to get real. But instead, he spent 2 years playing in subway stations, reworking his sound, recalibrating his confidence. One afternoon, a renowned filmmaker passed by, paused, and asked for his name. That moment turned into a soundtrack deal. Now, his music scores documentaries about resilience. His delay wasn't a failure, it was a fine-tuning. Even Michelangelo, one of the greatest sculptors in history, spent years refining pieces the world thought he had abandoned. His perfectionism was seen as procrastination, but his delay birthed David. Meanwhile, a lesser-known sculptor of his time, Cristoforo Solari, rushed commissions to appease the public and faded into obscurity. The difference? One waited on divine precision, the other hurried into forgettable relevance. Why does the world pressure you to rush? Could it be that your depth intimidates their speed? When elephants migrate across vast terrains, they pause often, not because they're weak, but because they know their weight shifts the ground. You are one of those souls. Your journey has never been about quick steps. It's about ground-breaking ones. Think of Julia Ngozi, a 51-year-old seamstress from Nairobi who spent 30 years sewing in silence while others built brands online. She never posted a reel, never shouted into the digital void, but her work spoke in threads. One day, her designs were discovered by a Paris fashion scout visiting family. Today, her name is stitched into gowns on global runways. She wasn't invisible, she was incubating. The recalibration period can feel brutal, disorienting, like the compass is spinning. But when God recalibrates, He removes the noise, then reintroduces clarity. Isaiah 30:21 says, "Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.'" Could the silence in your life be the very signal that He is fine-tuning your direction? Let's not ignore the consequence of moving too soon. Think of Elizabeth Holmes, once hailed as a tech genius with Theranos. She rushed the promise before it was ready, skipped the testing, skipped the recalibration. And what followed was not just collapse, it was exposure. Because promotion without preparation always leads to public disintegration. So here you are, feeling paused, misunderstood, undervalued. But what if you're being shielded, not rejected? What if your spirit is too sacred to be seen until it's secure? Chosen one, you were not made for premature applause. You were made for divine accuracy. And accuracy takes time. It takes recalibration. And sometimes God slows your steps, not because you're failing, but because your weight requires precision. Let this be your reminder. You are not lagging behind. You are being tuned by the master composer. You are not forgotten. You are being refined. And soon, very soon, when the frequency is right, your sound will rise. Not in chaos, but in clarity. Have you ever walked into a room and felt something shift before a single word was spoken? That's not coincidence. That's resonance. As God's chosen one, your life is less about what you say and more about what you carry. And what you carry has a frequency. It either repels or attracts. It either aligns or clashes. And whether you know it or not, you're already broadcasting a signal to the future that's trying to reach you. The question is, does your signal match your calling? In the book of Acts, Paul and Silas were thrown into prison, but instead of sinking into despair, they sang. And as they worshipped, the foundation shook and the prison doors flew open. Acts 16:25-26. What changed the atmosphere wasn't brute force. It was spiritual frequency. Their praise aligned with heaven's vibration. And that frequency didn't just free them, it freed everyone around them. Your energy works the same way. You don't need to manipulate circumstances when your internal state is aligned. Like tuning forks that begin vibrating in harmony across the room, your environment begins to respond to your soul's resonance. So, what are you vibrating right now? Fear or faith? Scarcity or overflow? Delay or destiny? Ayana Brooks, a 33-year-old barista who began writing poems during her 5-minute breaks, not for likes, not for approval, just to release the tension in her chest. Her co-workers started sharing them. A local spoken word artist discovered her pieces and asked her to perform. One performance turned into a tour. One voice turned into a movement. Ayana didn't force doors open. She vibrated at the frequency of freedom until they opened on their own. Why do you think some people seem to attract miracles while others chase them endlessly? Even in the animal kingdom, resonance is sacred. Dolphins use echolocation, bouncing sound waves to see what's hidden. Bats navigate complete darkness using the same principle. Could it be that your spirit is built the same way? To sense truth before it's seen? To bounce divine vibrations off your surroundings until your path is revealed? Now think of Oprah Winfrey. Before she was a media icon, she was a news anchor in Baltimore, told she was unfit for television. But something in her refused to conform. Instead of shrinking, she refined her energy. Eventually, her resonance, compassion, vision, authenticity began attracting global opportunities. Now compare that to someone like Andrew Tate, a former world champion kickboxer turned entrepreneur and internet personality, known not only for his dominance in the ring, but for his digital empire built on hyper-masculine rhetoric, controversial teachings, and unrelenting self-promotion. His voice doesn't whisper, it blares. His brand thrives on confrontation, virality, and volume. To many, he represents raw confidence and unapologetic ambition in an age of watered-down values. But such a frequency, while powerful, doesn't just command attention, it provokes backlash. Legal warfare, global scrutiny, and polarizing opinions have followed in his wake. Because in the spiritual realm, what you amplify returns amplified. What you sow in noise often reaps resistance in kind. Not all attention is favor. Not all attraction is elevation. Sometimes the spotlight is a test disguised as influence, and sometimes it exposes more than it exalts. Could the reason you're still waiting be because your signal keeps changing frequencies? And what if the future version of you isn't far, it's just vibrating at a level you haven't fully stepped into yet? The universe isn't ignoring you, it's just waiting for you to lock into the right alignment. And alignment doesn't start externally, it starts energetically. That's why Jesus said in Matthew 9:29, "According to your faith be it unto you." Faith is frequency, and the more consistent the signal, the faster the reality collapses into your timeline. Let me show you another life. Darnell Pierce was a substitute teacher in Kansas. Every night he meditated on the same image, himself in a classroom filled with eager young leaders, books he'd written on their desks. It felt silly at first, but he did it anyway. 6 years later, he didn't just teach. He led a leadership academy and published 3 books. Not because he begged for favor, because he became the frequency of the future he desired. Your mind is a transmitter, your spirit is a receiver, and your consistency is the amplifier. But if your energy wavers between doubt and belief, between cynicism and hope, between survival and vision, then your results will do the same. You were not made to echo confusion. You were made to radiate clarity. Look at how sunflowers rotate throughout the day, always following the sun. They don't question where the light is. They move toward it. What if your alignment is as simple as that? Turning yourself toward what feels life-giving and staying there. Still, not everyone respects sacred energy. Some people sense your power and try to distort it. Manipulators don't attack noise, they attack frequency. Because frequency changes rooms. That's why your silence disturbs those who operate in control. It's not the volume, it's the vibration. Chosen one, your energy is not random, it's encoded, holy, engineered by heaven to attract people, provision, and purpose that belong to your exact bandwidth. But you can't hold that frequency if you keep shifting back into old patterns. This isn't about pretending, it's about stabilizing, becoming the version of you that already carries what you've been waiting for. So what would happen if, starting today, you aligned everything, your thoughts, your habits, your choices, with the life you already know is yours? Because when the resonance is right, the breakthrough doesn't just come to you, it rushes. You've been waiting for proof, waiting for a sign, for confirmation. But chosen one, what if the very thing you've been waiting for is waiting on you? In the spiritual realm, faith is not a response to evidence. Faith creates evidence. It's not the reward, it's the blueprint. And every miracle, every shift, every breakthrough you've ever prayed for starts first in belief, not visibility. Hebrews 11:1 declares, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Read that again. Substance before sight. Heaven moves not when you see clearly, but when you choose to move in the dark, trusting that the light will catch up. Could that be the test you're in right now? Think of how architects draft blueprints long before a single brick is laid. The structure doesn't exist yet, but the belief does. And once the design is trusted, resources follow. What if your faith is the design heaven has been waiting for, and the delay has only been because the blueprint hasn't been released? There's a moment in the life of Abraham when God tells him to go, to leave everything familiar behind, not knowing where he was going, only that he was sent. Genesis 12:1-4. And from that single act of obedience came generations of promise. Could it be that your one step of irrational faith is carrying generational weight even now? Let's talk about Simone Travis, a 28-year-old special ed teacher from Ohio. Her salary barely covered rent, but she had a dream: to start a school for children with learning differences. No funding, no partners, just conviction. So she started posting videos online, teaching literacy strategies using humor and compassion. At first, only a few people watched, but one video caught the eye of a philanthropist whose nephew was dyslexic. Within a year, she opened her own center. Today, she has a waiting list of families across 4 states. Her evidence didn't precede her faith. It followed it. But not everyone chooses belief. Some, like Charles Ponzi, build empires of illusion, hoping that fake confidence will manufacture credibility. For a time, he fooled millions, but truth has a frequency, and eventually, illusion collapses. His fall wasn't just public, it was prophetic, because belief without foundation is a performance, not faith. Could it be that your refusal to pretend is what's making room for something real? Have you noticed how salmon swim upstream, defying currents, leaping over obstacles, just to return to the waters where they were born? No map, no GPS, just inner knowing. That's faith. That's encoded divine direction. What if you too are returning to a destiny that's always been yours, even if the path back feels impossible? And what if, like Mary, the mother of Jesus, you're being asked to believe something that defies logic? An angel tells her she'll carry the Savior of the world. No proof, no explanation, just the words, "Let it be to me according to your word." Luke 1:38. That moment of agreement shifted all of history. So what history could your yes rewrite? Faith is not passive, it's a magnet. When you believe something is possible, truly believe, it sends out a call, a pulse, a resonance that rearranges circumstances. that attracts people, opens doors, and collapses delay. Here's another example. 45-year-old Leo Mancini was a burned-out accountant in Milan. Quiet, overlooked, but he kept seeing visions in his dreams, visions of a vineyard, of harvesting grapes, of his hands in the soil. He knew nothing about farming. Still, he obeyed the dreams, bought land, planted, prayed. It took 7 years, but his wine now wins awards across Europe. When asked how he did it, he said, "The vineyard grew in my faith before it grew in the ground." Faith doesn't erase fear, it just walks anyway. And sometimes the loudest acts of faith look like stillness, like refusing to beg, like showing up daily with no applause, like sowing into invisible fields, like building an ark before a single drop of rain, like Noah did, mocked by his generation, vindicated by the flood. What if your silence has been faith in disguise? Chosen one, you are not here to beg for evidence. You are here to birth it, through your faith, through your risk, through your refusal to collapse when nothing makes sense. You were never meant to wait until you see to believe. You were meant to believe until the world has no choice but to see. Because in the kingdom of God, belief is not the reward, it is the key. You say you believe, but belief without movement is just noise. In the realm of the chosen, God doesn't just listen to words. He reads steps. Heaven watches your feet more than your phrases, because true faith doesn't talk, it walks. It makes the appointment before the opportunity. It builds the ark before the clouds. It knocks on doors that don't exist yet, simply because it knows a hallway is coming. James 2:17 says it clearly. Faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. The ones who shift history don't wait until conditions are ideal. They act. They stir the water before the miracle. Could the breakthrough you've been praying for be waiting on one bold, awkward, terrifying step forward? In the world of physics, there's a principle called kinetic activation. Energy remains stored until motion releases it. The same is true spiritually. Faith is stored energy, but action, that's the release. That's the moment momentum begins. Rosa Lemieux, a 56-year-old grandmother from Lyon who had a passion for storytelling but never went to school past the 8th grade. Every night, she scribbled children's tales into a worn-out notebook. One morning, she took a deep breath, walked into the local library and handed her stories to the clerk. No agent, no plan, just movement. 3 months later, her stories were published in a local series, and now they've been translated into 6 languages. Her feet moved before her fears could. Have you ever noticed how lionesses hunt? They don't roar first, they move, they observe, calculate, and then, at the right moment, they leap. No announcement, no warning, just decisive action. You, chosen one, have been observing long enough. The world doesn't need your explanation, it's waiting for your execution. Even in Scripture, this truth echoes. When the woman with the issue of blood touched Jesus' cloak, she didn't wait for permission. She didn't announce herself. She just reached. Mark 5:27-29. That act of faith, small, desperate, and courageous, stopped heaven in its tracks. And Jesus said, "Your faith has made you well." Her action spoke. Why do so many people say they trust God but refuse to move unless they have guarantees? Take Kari Mensah, a former mechanic from Johannesburg. For years he dreamed of building eco-housing in underserved neighborhoods. He had no blueprint, no investors. But one day he took his last paycheck and bought a pile of reclaimed wood. He started building a model home in his backyard. Today, that model is a prototype adopted by 5 municipalities. His hands said yes long before money did. Faith is not the absence of fear, it's obedience despite it. And disobedience often looks like overthinking. You weren't meant to stay in your head, analyzing your calling like a math equation. You were meant to walk on water, not chart it. Remember Dietrich Bonhoeffer? He was a German pastor and theologian who didn't just preach against Hitler's regime. He acted. He joined resistance efforts, risking his life. He was eventually executed. But his legacy, it outlived the Reich. His action wasn't loud, but it was eternal. Now contrast him with Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, who sought peace through appeasement, inaction in the name of comfort. History remembers the silence too. So what are you delaying because you're afraid to look foolish? Even the earth obeys momentum. Rivers carve through rock, not because they shout, but because they move. Wind shapes mountains. Ants build empires grain by grain. What if your next miracle isn't waiting for a prayer, but for a motion? Let's talk about Mateo Ruiz, a quiet security guard in Bogota who dreamed of opening a shelter for orphaned boys. Every evening he set aside one meal and prayed over it. Not much, just one meal. After a year, he had stored enough to rent a single room. That room became a house. That house became a haven. He didn't wait for the full vision. He acted on the part he could see. And that's where most people fall, at the edge of partial clarity. They want a 10-step map before they take one step. But chosen one, the light comes as you walk. The doors open when you knock. The oil flows as you pour. Jesus never told Peter to test the water. He said, "Come." That's it. Just move. Just step. Just act like it's real, even when your legs shake and your heart pounds. The kingdom doesn't respond to hesitation. It responds to motion. So here's the real question. What are you waiting for? What excuse is still louder than your conviction? What fear is still stronger than your fire? This isn't the season to explain. This is the season to act, to write the email, submit the form, forgive the person, book the ticket, speak the dream aloud, even if your voice trembles. The earth doesn't wait for your comfort. Destiny doesn't pause for your doubt. Chosen one, your movement is your prophecy. Your steps are your sermon, and your action, that's your announcement to heaven. I'm ready. You've been feeling it, haven't you? The conversations that once excited you now feel hollow. The spaces that used to comfort you now feel suffocating. And the people you used to resonate with, something feels off. It's not arrogance. It's not isolation. It's evolution. You're not broken. You've simply outgrown the frequencies that once sustained you. Just like a tree must eventually break the pot that once nurtured its roots, you too are expanding beyond what once held you. And that's not betrayal. That's becoming. That's alignment. Isaiah 43:19 says, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it?" But the truth is, sometimes you don't perceive it. You just feel the quiet discomfort of a spirit that no longer fits in its former frame. Why do the things that used to fulfill you now leave you restless? Why does your soul now crave solitude over social noise? Why does silence feel safer than small talk? Because you're not the same, and neither is your assignment. You're like the eagle whose wingspan becomes too wide for the nest it was born in. At some point the air starts calling. The sky starts vibrating with a frequency your bones remember. And if you try to stay grounded when you're built to fly, your spirit begins to ache from self-containment. Think about Leora Daniels, a 44-year-old jazz pianist from Chicago. For over 2 decades she played in smoky downtown bars. Everyone knew her name. But one night, mid-song, she paused. Not from fatigue, but from disconnection. The music was no longer music. It was memory. The next day, she quit. Started composing orchestral scores for films. Today, her sound echoes through documentaries that explore grief, healing, and rebirth. She didn't lose her gift. She outgrew the frequency that once framed it. Some people will resent that shift in you. They'll say, "You've changed," and they'll be right, but not in the way they think. You're not changing to impress. You're changing to survive, to breathe, to stretch into the full measure of your calling. Now contrast that with someone like Jordan Belfort. once known as the Wolf of Wall Street. He operated in high financial frequencies, risk, ego, adrenaline, but without moral alignment. The same drive that made him rich also made him reckless. Eventually, he lost everything, because frequency without foundation is just noise. Have you noticed that certain rooms feel louder now, even if no one's speaking? That some friendships feel like echo chambers of your former self? Let's talk about Elijah Hamidi, a 30-year-old fitness coach in Casablanca. He built his career around performance, body image, social media clout, hustle culture. But after a car crash that left him in silence for 10 days, he emerged different. He no longer wanted to preach transformation through vanity. He began teaching breathwork and trauma healing through movement. Lost followers, gained peace. His audience changed, but so did his depth. The noise left and truth arrived. This truth is woven into the design of life. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly by tweaking its legs. It must dissolve, reform, and emerge unrecognizable. Could it be that your ache isn't weakness, but a signal of transformation? Psalm 84:7 says, "They go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion." That means movement, progress, layer after layer, glory to glory. So why stay in yesterday's skin when today's call requires wings? You may not recognize yourself right now, but that's okay. Neither does the cocoon recognize the wings it's forming. Chosen one, you are not losing your way, you're losing your limitations. That's why the familiar feels foreign. That's why laughter sometimes tastes like dust. It's not depression, it's discernment. And you don't need everyone to understand. Some frequencies only the destined can hear. Some seasons are not for explaining, they're for obeying. Let me introduce you to Ava Lee, a 62-year-old candle maker from Edinburgh. For 35 years, she crafted soy wax candles by hand, sold at local fairs. But one night, she felt prompted to start praying over each candle, quietly, intimately. Her sales dropped at first, then suddenly word spread. People began saying her candles brought peace, healing, even deliverance. She hadn't marketed herself. She had aligned. The product didn't change, the frequency did. And now, chosen one, your frequency is shifting too. You were never meant to stay compatible with what God only meant as your launch pad. That friend group, that job, that version of yourself that always played it safe. They were stepping stones, not sanctuaries. And the longer you linger, the louder your soul will scream for air. You're not difficult, you're not cold, you're not confused. You're becoming incompatible with environments that can no longer carry your sound. So don't shrink. Don't lower your volume to stay in rooms you've outgrown. Don't apologize for the silence you now require or the solitude you now crave. You are not walking away. You are walking toward resonance, toward peace, toward the divine vibration that was buried beneath layers of approval, addiction, and emotional clutter. Because, chosen one, your next chapter doesn't begin when they invite you. It begins when you outgrow them. There's a reason you feel like everything's intensifying, like your spirit's being stretched, tested, recalibrated. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. Because somewhere ahead of you, not years away, but close, is a divine appointment. A moment designed before you were born. A conversation, a door, a shift in atmosphere so sacred that heaven is setting you apart now, so that when it comes, you'll be ready. Ephesians 2:10 declares, "For we are God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." Prepared in advance. That means what's coming wasn't improvised. It was already inscribed in heaven's calendar. So what if the tension you feel isn't resistance, but a countdown? Think of a master violinist before stepping onto a grand stage. She tightens every string, adjusts every peg, not because the instrument is flawed, but because the moment demands precision. That's what God is doing with you. And yes, the tuning feels like pressure. The silence feels like delay. But what if it's just divine rehearsal before public release? Reuben Miles, a 36-year-old elevator technician from Toronto. He worked underground in high-rise shafts for years, rarely seeing daylight, barely interacting with clients. Quiet, faithful, unseen. Until one day, during a routine job in a luxury hotel, the elevator malfunctioned, trapping a foreign diplomat inside. Reuben calmly coached them through breathing exercises, repaired the glitch manually, and restored the system without panic. A week later, he was offered a government contract to lead emergency engineering training across multiple provinces. His private faithfulness positioned him for a public appointment. His moment came because he'd been practicing excellence without an audience. Could the same be happening to you? In nature, this is how growth works. The oak tree doesn't prepare when the storm arrives. It prepares before. Its roots deepen in dry seasons so that when winds howl, it doesn't bend. Could your current discomfort be root-deepening preparation for a storm you're meant to stand through, not avoid? Now consider biblical David. He wasn't invited to the anointing ceremony. He was left in the field tending sheep. But when the prophet Samuel saw him, the oil flowed. 1 Samuel 16. David didn't demand the stage. He developed in the shadows. And before he ever stepped into royalty, he conquered bears, lions, isolation, not for survival, but for future responsibility. Are you mistaking your cave for a curse when it's actually your curriculum? While others scramble for visibility, you've been handed something more sacred: preparation. That means what you're carrying isn't ordinary. That means who you're becoming isn't common. And that means your delay isn't failure, it's timing. Think of Sir Ken Robinson, a British education reformer. For decades he taught in quiet classrooms, studying creativity in children. The world didn't notice until his TED Talk on education became the most watched of all time. His years of unseen work were a runway, not a detour. Now contrast him with someone like Elizabeth Holmes, who rushed visibility, skipped preparation, and cost people millions. Her platform came before her character, and the fall was inevitable. So ask yourself, what are you being protected from by this season of refinement? What cracks are being sealed quietly now, so they don't destroy your foundation later? Lean Tran wasn't looking to be discovered, but heaven had other plans. At 29, she baked bread alone in her parents' garage in Melbourne. No storefront, no ads, just quiet dedication. Then, one rainy afternoon, a well-known food critic, stranded nearby, followed the scent of fresh bread to her door. He tasted a slice and wrote a review that went viral. Within a week, she had 5 offers. In a month, her first artisan bakery opened. Her moment seemed sudden, but it was years in the making, because when preparation meets divine timing, the door always opens. Divine appointments rarely announce themselves with trumpets. They show up disguised, as detours, interruptions, quiet whispers, and if you're not grounded, you'll miss them. But you, chosen one, you've been sensing something. That pull to wake earlier, that nudge to go deeper, that strange feeling like something is coming, but you don't yet know what. That's the preparation. Even in science, pressure precedes phase change. Water doesn't boil at room temperature. Diamonds don't form without crushing weight. And destiny doesn't activate without sacred readiness. What you're walking through now may feel invisible, thankless, slow, but it's encoded with purpose. Because when the moment comes, you won't just step into it, you'll match its frequency. And some won't understand. They'll mock your waiting. They'll say, "You're wasting time," not realizing that your time has already been scheduled in heaven. But what if you're the Esther of your generation, hidden until the kingdom needed you? What if your silence has been strategy, your stillness a setup? And what if the next shift isn't waiting for the world to change? It's waiting for you to walk in fully prepared. Chosen one, stay in position. Keep building. Keep listening. The appointment is set. The room is ready. All that's left is for you to arrive. You think you're the one waiting for clarity, for confirmation, for someone to see you, choose you, call your name. But chosen one, what if you're not the only one waiting? What if, right now, someone is praying for exactly what you carry? Not a shinier version of yourself, not a healed, successful version, just you, raw, becoming, heaven-marked. Romans 8:19 says, "For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed." That means someone, somewhere, is already crying out for the kind of love, wisdom, boldness, or healing that only you can deliver. You're not extra, you're essential. Let me tell you about Brenna Castillo, a 41-year-old nurse in Guatemala, quiet, introverted, always doubting if she was doing enough. One night, she stayed hours after her shift ended, holding the hand of a dying patient. No words, just presence. What she didn't know was that he'd prayed the night before. "God, just send someone who will stay with me so I don't die alone." Her decision to stay, simple, quiet, was the fulfillment of a desperate request. How many answers are locked inside your obedience? How many people are waiting for you to stop hesitating and start showing up? Nature understands this principle. Bees don't hoard their pollen. They carry it instinctively, pollinating every flower they pass. Not because they think they're saviors, but because it's in their design. What if your very existence was never about chasing validation, but carrying provision to those you haven't even met yet? You were made to bless while you move. Think of Joseph in Genesis. When he interpreted Pharaoh's dream and positioned Egypt to survive famine, he wasn't just saving a nation. He was preserving the lives of his brothers who had betrayed him. They had no idea their survival depended on the very one they tried to bury. What if your rejection was part of someone else's redemption? What if your pain was someone else's permission to heal? In the real world, Brian Stevenson, founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, spent years working without recognition, fighting for the wrongly convicted. For those men he helped free from death row, he wasn't just a lawyer. He was the answer to prayer. Contrast that with Jeffrey Epstein, powerful, resourced, and deeply misaligned. His influence destroyed lives because power without alignment becomes spiritual poison. So what are you becoming? Are you offering oxygen, or are you taking up space? Let me introduce you to Theo Munene, a 22-year-old barista in Nairobi. Each morning he wrote encouraging messages on a chalkboard at his cafe. One day the sign read, "You are still here. That means you still matter." A teenager walked in, planning to end his life. He read that sentence and broke down. They never spoke. But that single line rerouted a soul Theo never knew. He just obeyed the nudge. How many divine collisions are waiting on your willingness to act, especially when no one's clapping? Even trees live by this law. A single fig tree can feed birds, insects, even nearby plants, without moving. It doesn't seek approval. It just roots, grows, and gives. You, chosen one, were planted to bear fruit for someone else's survival. But maybe you're still shrinking, still believing you need to be more visible, more healed, more qualified. What if your not enough is already exactly right for the assignment? Your voice may tremble, your hands may bear scars, but those scars are sacred. They prove you've lived through what others are still fighting. That's why your presence matters. That's why your silence convicts. Because you don't speak from theory, you speak from testimony. And somewhere out there, someone is whispering, "God, send me someone who understands." And you, yes, you, are the one being sent. Not because you're flawless, but because you're aligned. Not because you chased the spotlight, but because you endured the shadows. Chosen one, don't underestimate your arrival. You are someone's divine interruption. You are someone's sacred yes. And this moment, the fact that you're still breathing, still rising, means the assignment is still active. So move, speak, show up, because someone is praying right now, and the answer is you. You've called it wasted time. You've stared at the calendar, counted the months, and whispered, "God, what was all this for?" But chosen one, what you thought was delay was actually development. The waiting didn't weaken you, it weaponized you. It trained your discernment, sharpened your peace, built your resistance to counterfeit promises. Every not yet you endured wasn't punishment. It was power in disguise. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles." Waiting in the kingdom doesn't mean inactivity. It means heavenly strength training. While others ran ahead and collapsed, you were being spiritually conditioned in stillness. Can you feel it now? How different you are from who you were a year ago. Not just wiser, but deadlier to the forces that once distracted you? So what if the silence wasn't abandonment, but a strategy to recalibrate your perception? What if the hiddenness wasn't rejection, but protection while heaven loaded your arsenal? Think of it like this. A bow is most powerful when it's pulled back. The tension, the stillness, the stretch, that's where velocity is born. Your weight has been God's way of pulling you into position. So when the release comes, you don't just move, you strike with precision. Let me introduce you to Tasha Ellington, a 47-year-old social worker in Houston. After a workplace betrayal, she spent 14 months unemployed, praying, journaling, and questioning everything. People said she was wasting time. But during that silence, she designed an emotional resilience curriculum based on her own survival. Today, it's being implemented in trauma centers across 3 states. Her waiting season became the birthplace of a weapon. Now contrast her with someone like Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder of FTX. His rise was meteoric, but his foundation was hollow. While he rushed through doors opened by hype and unchecked ambition, there was no waiting, no tempering, no integrity testing. And when the storm came, it all collapsed. Why? Because what isn't forged in the wait can't survive the fire. Have you ever wondered why God slowed you down just when things were gaining momentum? Why the opportunity dried up right when you felt ready? What if it wasn't sabotage, but sacred redirection? In nature, we see this law at work. The Arctic fox remains hidden for months before surfacing. Volcanoes simmer underground before erupting with life-altering force. Bamboo spends 5 years growing underground before it bursts through the surface, then shoots up several feet in weeks. You weren't dormant, you were deepening. Now think of Paul the Apostle. After his dramatic encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus, he didn't immediately start preaching. Galatians 1:17 tells us he went into Arabia for 3 years, alone, studying, processing, becoming. Before Paul wrote letters that would shake the world, he had to be silenced to the world. Could it be that your silence is shaping your spiritual authority? Let me share the story of Emmanuel Reyes, a 34-year-old former youth pastor from Manila. He was forced to step away from ministry after a personal scandal he didn't cause but got caught up in. For 2 years he disappeared. No preaching, no platform, but every night he studied, repented, sat with truth. One day, out of nowhere, a former student asked him to speak to a group of struggling young men. That one moment turned into a revival movement across the city. His wilderness became his weapon, and the fruit that came after was not possible before the wait. You weren't wasting time. You were being trusted with time. And the enemy hates that, because the most dangerous version of you is not the busy one. It's the rooted one. Not the visible one, but the vibrationally stable one. When your soul stops needing applause, when your heart stops begging for shortcuts, you become a spiritual weapon the enemy can't track. So why are you apologizing for the quiet season? Why are you explaining the years no one clapped for you? Why are you mourning what God meant as military training? You didn't miss anything. You were being sharpened. You are not a flower late to bloom. You are a blade, hand-forged in the fire of obscurity. You are not a backup plan. You are heaven's secret strategy. You are not wasted time. You are refined timing. And now, the wait is working in your favor. It's not dead time. It's stored energy. And when God releases it, hell will regret ever touching you. God's timing is not late. It's precise. So now, chosen one, as this message comes to a close, breathe this in deeply. You didn't stumble here by accident. You were led. Every word, every pause, every revelation was divinely timed for your soul in this exact moment. You were meant to receive this, not when you thought you were ready, but when heaven knew you could finally carry it. Do you feel that stirring inside you? That quiet confirmation that this is more than a video, it's a visitation. God is not done with you. In fact, He's just beginning. Everything you've survived, everything you've questioned, every moment you almost gave up, it has led you to this holy intersection of clarity, confirmation, and calling. So don't scroll away and forget this. Seal it in your spirit. Carry it forward like sacred fire. And if this word resonated with you, if it confirmed what you've been hearing in your spirit, then let it echo in the comments by typing 777. I receive it. That number isn't random. It symbolizes divine completion, heavenly alignment, and spiritual perfection. Like this video so it reaches others who are silently praying for a sign. Share it with someone who's been walking through the shadows, not knowing God was still guiding them. Subscribe to this channel if your soul keeps saying, "This is for me." There are more messages ahead, not just content, but confirmation. And whether you've supported this message through a super thanks, a comment, or just quietly listening, thank you, truly. Your presence here is felt, your journey is seen, and your soul is honored. Now go forth with boldness, not fear. Go knowing that heaven has already cleared the path ahead. All that's left is for you to walk it. May peace surround you, favor follow you, and divine protection be your constant companion. You are chosen, you are loved, and you are not alone.